Welcome back to another Hellsing video, everybody. I discussed how I felt Alucard was one of the best written, overpowered characters in fiction in a previous video. How him being so incredibly OP actually benefited the story that he was involved in. But today I want to take a look at my second favorite character in the series, Seras Victoria, and how she gathers the strength of being an incredible character not from her being overpowered, but by being deeply underpowered. And I use that term metaphorically. I'm not talking about physical strength, but psychologically, how a sense of fear and weakness held Seras back, and how delving back into her trauma and acceptance of those weaknesses actually caused her to push forward into who she was fully meant to become. Full warning, just like in my last video, this will contain heavy spoilers for Hellsing Ultimate, the series, and the manga, so if you haven't seen it and care about such things, I recommend leaving the video now. But before you do, go ahead and give it a like, and hey, maybe even subscribe. I hear that if you do, you have a much higher chance of overcoming your own past traumas and getting cool vampire powers. Just saying, hit that subscribe button. On a surface level, it may seem like the character of Seras Victoria is only here for fan service and comic relief. She's got the build of your typical big titty anime waifu, and she carries a cute and submissive attitude when first introduced. But there are so many layers to her character, and as they unravel, I would dare say she's one of the best written, not just in Hellsing, but one of the better written, quote-unquote, strong female characters that there are out there, even if we first see her as a damsel in distress. She's a police officer at the mercy of a vampire. Hunted down by Alucard, he has the vampire in his sights, about to be killed, but can't do so without killing Seras in the process. Alucard, being the anti-hero himself, is committed to sacrificing her for his kill, but offers her the choice of becoming a vampire upon her death instead of just dying here and now. It's not really much of a choice at all, and there's barely any time to decide, so Seras agrees. Alucard sires her, and she becomes his devoted follower and trains under him as the story moves forward. Seras has apprehensions to fully embracing the life of a vampire, understandably so. To complete her transformation, she must drink the blood of another, but is constantly hesitant to do so. Perhaps because it would mean disconnecting from a past version of herself that she has yet to let herself give up. In a way, it's a fear of ascension, a fear of becoming more powerful. And again, I don't mean this in just a physical strength kind of way. In a lot of spiritualism, they'll call this success barriers. It has to do with you not believing that you deserve to be on a higher level, and so you self-sabotage in order to keep yourself on that lower level. And those reasons for self-sabotage often come from deep-seated trauma, many times of which from our childhoods. And, lo and behold, we would come to find out that Seras has one of the most tragic and horrifying childhoods out of anyone out there. Now look, I'm no stranger to graphic imagery when it comes to fiction. More than half my channel talks about the manga Berserk, for God's sakes. But even being so steeped in adult mediums of violence and traumatic experiences, I can still sometimes feel the edge factor was placed in a story to just have it. Like, since we can get away with it, let's do it just for the sake of it. And a lot of fiction goes this route. And when I first saw Seras' backstory, I even thought to myself that this was placed here for shock value alone. But the more I thought about it and the more I reflected on the scene, I started to relate it more to that feeling of powerlessness and inadequacy that I thought was present in her character, and after a while it made a little more sense, and I have come to give it a lot more credit despite my initial feelings. Feeling powerless is something we all go through at certain times of our lives, but no more so than when we are in our childhoods. What do we do when adults we've seen as providers and masters of wisdom and courage are shown to be just as fragile as anything else and treated like fodder? To see your adult figures collapse into the human truth of fragility, it destroys that sense of power even within yourself. If those you believe to be the providers of true power are torn away, what does that say about your own inner worth? Seras, as a small child, witnessed the death of her father at the hands of a duo of criminals. Her mother's fate was even worse. Not only was she killed, but also her corpse was sexually assaulted, while Seras herself, stuck with a gunshot wound, had to witness the entire event. It left me with a very visceral, sickening feeling that I had to stop watching for about a day or two before going back to the show. Such a disturbing event in one's childhood, it's no shock that Seras was incredibly unbalanced in how to deal with this. She has displayed conflicting personality traits, swapping back and forth between being timid and shy to being chaotic and violent. A switch in her mind that was never able to find that balance, and no one was there to teach her how to channel that rage or deal with those feelings of inadequacy. That is, until the most unlikely of all role models showed up at her front door in the form of Alucard, formerly known as Dracula, and the Hellsing organization. Not much is known about Seras' time as a police officer. We mostly can guess that she became one trying to find that sense of control and to do the right thing. But if it's anything like her introduction into Hellsing, she's first seen as weak, timid, and unable to do what she needs. This includes drinking blood to become a true vampire, but also having the trouble expressing herself to others. Upon her first meeting of Pip and the Wild Geese, they laugh at her seemingly frail and weak demeanor. Seras doesn't carry herself with any kind of sense of confidence or power. She's completely the opposite of Alucard, who is just overflowing with this dominant energy. But Alucard has completely embraced who he is and where he has wound up in his extremely long life. There's no question in his mind about who he is or how he views the living and the dead. But with Seras, there's nothing but questions. But this all comes to a head when Seras is put into a position where she is the main line of defense for the Hellsing mansion. An artificially made vampire named Zoran physically and verbally humiliates Seras and uses her abilities to make Seras relive those horrifying moments of her childhood. It's all brought to the surface in a violent and careless way. But it also serves as a jumpstart to Seras' true purpose. Seras was always holding herself back, afraid to speak up, afraid to take charge, afraid to face the darkness that took away her innocence. Becoming a vampire, symbolically in lots of fictional stories, is a corruption of innocence, embracing the darker side of yourself. But in the case of Seras, her innocence was lost many years beforehand. Her becoming a true vampire symbolizes her stepping into that role of ascension, of recognizing the past but letting herself step into the future, to not let the dark trauma influence her present decisions. Seras has always had the potential to awaken her inner strength, but was choosing not to on a deep, buried level. It wasn't until she came face to face with the original reason for that fear once more that she realized this, along with some encouragement and the sacrifice of the character Pip. Now, Pip may have tried to womanize her a bit, but after seeing her in action, he had genuine respect for her and willingly offered his own body and blood for her to become a true vampire. But ultimately, it was still her that had to make the choice, to stay away from her calling to something higher and remain in that timid fear state, or to sink her teeth in and embrace the next level. Perhaps Seras losing one of her arms right before her ascension even further shows how she accepts losing a piece of herself in order to branch into that next stage of evolution, as she does not regenerate the arm but instead transmutes it into a new power, being able to use the blood and shadow as if it were another limb or even various weapons. Seras performs the ultimate beatdown on Zoran, fully showcasing her abilities here, and afterwards even states to Alexander Anderson that she no longer fears him or anybody. She's reached her own calm state. The past is dead and will no longer inform who she is in the present. In a way, I think there's a lot to learn from Seras' story. And it's kind of crazy to think that how in the midst of this whole vampires versus Nazi versus religious regenerator Anderson and everything else that's happening in this crazy story, that we have this truly profound story in the character of Seras overcoming fear and trauma and transforming herself into a force to be reckoned with. There's a lot to be learned here, and that despite it all, we are capable of being more than we allow ourselves to be. We need to stop holding ourselves back and neglecting these higher levels of consciousness because we foolishly believe that we are not ready for them. This is just the mind being scared to move on because at every new level there will be new problems. Problems we aren't used to, and we are afraid that we won't know how to handle them. But stepping into that unknown darkness of where we know we should go, rather than staying complacent where we are comfortable, is an important lesson that many will agree with, but few will have the actual courage to walk into. Seras is one of the few. Seras is a role model in that way. Now, what do you think about her journey, and reflecting on yourself, where in your life have you been holding yourself back from achieving a power that you greatly deserve? So what I'm saying is, you should go and drink that blood, and stop holding yourself back. So thank you for watching this video, guys. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Comment down below as well. Also think about subscribing and stick around. I do other anime, manga content, things of that nature. Look in the description below. Check out my Discord. Check out the Patreon. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. And I will talk to you in the next video.
There is one little question I'd like to ask. I've had a terrible series of misfortunes and have landed in the most dreadful of circumstance. How long will I be plagued by this bedlam?
Boy.